The ACC is imploding. Who are the best candidates to move to the Big 12? Well, there are a few. This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Baylor. I am in a child's bedroom from Sports Illustrated's Inside the Bears, and that is Cameron Stewart from Sports Illustrated's Inside the Bears. Thank you for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day. The Big 12 is getting richer. The ACC is falling apart. The SEC is trying to wander through expansion with Texas and Oklahoma. The Big 10 is getting two teams from the West that are outliers. And the Pac-12, well, it doesn't exist anymore. Cam, the Big 12 is in a great spot to pick up I still think it's the stupidest name in the world, the Magnificent Seven, or at least a couple of them.
Yes, they are. I mean, they're doing pretty well. It's weird how quiet kind of the SEC has been throughout this. I mean, really, since OU and UT decided to go over last year, they've really been quiet on expansion talks, whereas the Big Ten has been obviously dipping their feet in quite a bit with the West Coast. And now the Big 12 is just looking at anyone. They're giving a look at anyone, and they have some leverage now with the ACC potentially falling apart. It's a good position to be in. As we mentioned last year when the expansion started talking with the Big 12, that it was all good that they got more competitive, right? I think that was kind of, we didn't grab a huge market, but we got competitive in most sports by adding those four teams. Now they hold the cards to potentially get more competitive still and get some markets this time if the ACC falls apart.
Now, according to a source at 24/7 Sports, the ACC teams, these presidents of these seven schools, are upset that the conference is not on the forefront of expansion, and they haven't been. They're expected to make $43 million per school based on the revenue in 21 and 22. That falls 30 to 40 million short of payments to the SEC and the Big Ten, and not a lot. There's a dog. Who's now? There's tail in the background. Not a lot of movement is being made to fix that in the ACC. So 7 of their best brands are now shopping a move elsewhere. And the Big 12 is going to be ripe for some of these teams. I don't think Florida State is going to be a Big 12 school. I don't think Clemson is going to be a Big 12 school, or Miami. But there are a couple of these teams, namely maybe the biggest, UNC, that feel right in the Big 12, especially when you don't hear much about the SEC shopping schools or the Big 10. I think some of these brands are too big for the Big 12, the expansion of this conference and the ACC, its big presence being upset, bodes well for teams like NC State and UNC to be here.
Yeah, I think I was, in preparing for this, thought of like 5 or 6 couplets of teams, whether they come from the ACC or from the Pac-12. Obviously, well, maybe not to some people, but I think most people would agree the number one couplet, the pipe dream, would be the 2 Florida schools, Miami and Florida State, and bringing them in with UCF. SEC has been quiet. I don't think they would let that happen. I think the SEC would snap them up first. But the North Carolina one is interesting because I think UNC would be a very sexy prospect for the Big 10, which has more power than the Big 12, as we've seen in expansion. But we hear about this with so many other schools, is that there could be an opportunity where if you take UNC, you have to take NC State. And Big 10 might be like, well, we already have Rutgers. We already have Maryland. They're basically the same thing. So maybe in that case, you could swipe in and grab them, but that would be huge for the Big 12. Again, not the huge market, but pretty good everywhere else across the board in terms of alumni base, the money they're bringing in, very good academic institution, and very good across the board in sports on the whole. I know Carolina's not going to be, competing for the college football playoff year in, year out, but great basketball program, not season last year. Good football with Mac at the helm. It's been steady and good. And the ACC and Big 12 are pretty comparable in terms of football competition. They're good in baseball, really good at lacrosse. I know that's a big thing for you.
Hockey.
So they probably have a club team.
Boston College is in the ACC, so they could rub off on North Carolina.
Actually, so I had the couplet of Miami and Florida State, number one. I actually had BC and UMass, number two.
Oh, yes. Not
really
UConn either. Not UConn.
No.
Could have got another Northeast school.
That one is weird, but we're hearing that. We've been seeing that sourced, private sources.
Yeah, I'm not biting on that one.
I saw someone, I wish I could credit, I guess I could dig back and find it, but we're live. So I wish I could credit this person on the tweet, but someone was saying on Twitter, like with the UConn thing, it would be great for basketball. Big 12 is the basketball conference, everything like that. But it's like, everyone knows the money is coming from football. Why are we trying to become just the alt-right basketball conference, just way ahead of everybody? Like, let's start bringing in some football programs like Boston College and UMass.
Like BC and Syracuse, even from the ACC. Now, there are
former national champion Syracuse football, by the way.
Yeah.
R.I.P. Jim Brown.
Baylor's
not a great guy to be dating. Yeah.
There are 14 teams in this comp. Like, we've only talked about the Magnificent Seven, but also teams like Louisville that have been left off the board from that conversation. Who could go to the Big 12? What I'm seeing,
I think the most realistic could be Louisville and Pitt, by the way.
Very much so, especially with West Virginia.
Yeah.
There have been rumors, too, that the ACC, within the past week of the ACC seemingly imploding as 7 teams explore options outside of the conference. Somebody reported that Oregon, Washington, SMU, and West Virginia have been told – they've been told that they're in conversation with the ACC. So somebody said the 7 presidents were like, yeah, we might leave. And the ACC was like, wait a second. What if we had West Virginia? And
it's just like
maybe
telling Jerry Seinfeld, be like, hey, if the phone rings, it's Art Vandelay from Vandelay Industries. Hey, West Virginia, if Carolina asks, we invited you to come, okay? All right, I have the pictures still. Washington, you're coming.
Oregon,
just tell them that, okay? Just tell them.
Oregon to the ACC, trying to hold this thing together.
ACC!
So if you could, before we take, Phil Knight's it's the correct business decision for us. Sorry, he's a little older. It is the correct business decision.
Now, I watched Air over the end of last week. Did you watch Air yet?
I did. I've seen Air.
Thoughts?
Wouldn't watch it again.
Yeah, it's
not a bad
movie. Fine. Like, it was fine for a while. It was like, I was thinking maybe this is kind of the Matt Damon movie now. It felt like Ford versus Ferrari, where it was like, okay, like this is a good, enjoyable watch. It's flashy things. I like that. Very 80s. And then they just started doing these like intense monologues. Then I'm like, that didn't happen. You think we're children. And Matt Damon looks nothing like Sonny Vaccaro. Nothing. I know he's not, the face of the company, but he looks nothing like Sonny Vaccaro. But
so dream scenario here, reasonable. I'll say not dream, but reasonable scenario. Who are your 2 teams that are going to the Big 12 from this imploding ACC?
From the ACC specifically, okay. Because I think of the ones I had in my head, I would still love the Arizona schools, but out of the ACC, I think in terms of reasonable and good for the Big 12 would be the Louisville and Pitt. Those are 2.
Neither of them are part of the Magnificent Seven.
Not part of the Magnificent Seven. You just said the ACC. You said the ACC. If we're talking about the 7 and reasonable, I'd put the North Carolina schools.
I think it is
just ahead of the Virginia schools.
I think it's yeah. Speaking of kind of ranking these teams, had an idea. What if there are a lot of listeners out there who are kind of confused in this entire mix-up of expansion.
Give it to me in NBA terms. Yeah.
There's so many things going on here that I can't really explain it to me like I'm 5. So we're going to. We have taken every one of the Magnificent Seven and given them movies, compared them to movies that represent who they are. But first, have I ever told you about my favorite thing on earth? It's my dog sitting right behind me. If you're listening on podcast, you can't see it. I also love FanDuel. And if FanDuel is the greatest sports betting app, then my dog will raise her head. Boom. There you go. That was easy. Didn't even have to yell at her. She just knew what was happening. She's a part of the read today. Daisy says that FanDuel is the best place to go, the number one sports book in America, because it is. I go there and I bet on the NBA. I bet against the Boston Celtics, and I make a lot of money. I bet against the Los Angeles Lakers and make a lot of money. Vegas wants you to think that these big brands and powerhouse teams are going to win, and then they just don't. So you go to FanDuel right now and bet on the underdog in the NBA, and you're probably going to win some dough. Right now, you can get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's right. Put $1,000 down at FanDuel.com/locked on. FanDuel.com/locked on. When you put $1,000 up, then at that point, you can get $1,000 back in free play if it doesn't hit. It's a no sweat first bet. No sweat on that $1,000 at FanDuel.com/locked on. Great promotions every day. Safe and secure. Download the app. Get paid instantly when you win. FanDuel.com/locked on. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Dude, I was going to say I would hope that Tara and Daisy could meet. But then my Celtics caught another stray. Okay, look, I get it, bro. I'm like borderline suicidal over here, and I don't need Drake Toll throwing shots at the Boston Celtics.
How about, you know what we can do? We can have Tara, Daisy, Bell, which is a stupid name, by the way, because of what they did it for. And what was the other had a cool
Indy.
name? Bell and Indy. I thought it was Indy because Baylor won the national championship in Indiana. It was not.
No,
but they say
someone tweeted that back at me, even though I said it was the double meaning, quote tweeting the tweet that said the independence meaning. But
Independence. That's why it was Indy. And then Bell was because Pat Neff has bells.
Yes. How about that?
Ho, ho, ho.
Not like
Yes.
Goldie. That would have been a good name for an animal. Goldie?
Mm-hmm.
You
Also,
think so?
spelled Belle.
Yeah.
Not even like a ringing bell, just Bell. And it is because there are bells on campus, which is specific to Baylor. I get.
To be fair, yeah.
I get. Nobody else has
The next one's going to be named Statue.
a tradition like none other.
Brick. There you go.
23.5 karat gold. This is my bear, 23.5 karat gold.
Oh, brother.
Okay. Cam,
Line.
you have watched some movies recently. Can you elaborate, unpack that, please?
Yeah. So as I mentioned on right around New Year's Day, I guess, my New Year's resolution was to watch 200 new movies, Drake. That's 200 movies new to me. Okay. So some of them are like 100 years old, but they're new to me. And we're over 80 so far, 79 on Twitter. That's at Real Cam Stewart on Twitter. And I rate every one of them on a scale from 1 to 10. And the ones that are, I think, purposely bad, AKA I took an edible and they're so bad, I'm like trying to laugh at them because they're so bad. Those are ranked out of a scale to -10.
Oh.
And so it's got a couple of
20
things,
points.
watchability, the art of it all. The negative ones are mostly based on watchability. So like -8.5 is like a bad movie, but it's really fun to watch. So anyway, I love movies. You love movies. I like better movies. And so this is going to be perfect. And I will like to throw this out there. Drake said, I was thinking initially about football programs, about making the movies about, comparing these teams' football programs. But you said universities plus university athletic departments.
Yep.
So I just want that out there. Before we get into this list.
Well, these expansion teams, Magnificent Seven, if any are to come to the Big 12, we need to understand the full scope of them as a university and their athletic program, not just football, though that is pretty much what matters.
It's the biggest one for sure.
Let's start with what I consider to be the biggest brand coming out of the Magnificent Seven, and that to me is Florida State. What movie is Florida State?
So I have Florida State as one of my favorite movies, to be fair. Goodfellas. You ever seen it?
Yeah. Gangster.
Great movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you think of gangster movies, what do you think of?
That's The Godfather.
Yeah. And then Goodfellas is probably in the next breath.
Bingo.
Florida State. Great football program. Decades, right? When you think of great football in the South, they're not in the first tier. Even though they may make an argument for it.
Right.
But you're thinking first about Alabama, LSU,
Georgia,
maybe even Florida. people of our generation, especially, seeing
Yes.
a ton of success from Florida, and not that national prominence that Florida State had in the 90s. So, again, great movie, very well known still, great brand, Goodfellas. R.I.P. Ray Liotta.
Florida State is Saw, the Saw franchise.
All right. Very similar.
There are a million of these movies. They start so great, classic, right? I mean, like everybody knows what Saw is. But then toward the end, got kind of weird and inconsistent. Kind of became a bit of a joke. Like there were good moments. There've been good recent moments. But by the end of this series, like, all right, man. And we get it. You're Saw. You were good once upon a time, but you have that little racist piece of you that you're not ever going to give up.
Yeah.
And we're all just kind of over it at this point. You've been inconsistent, and
Anyway,
you're just not that good right now. Yeah. Florida State's.
Here's another top 10 recruiting class.
Latest installment
Saw
of
12.
being terrible. Basketball was terrible this past season. I mean, most of their sports they had a bad sports year altogether. So I'm going Saw. You're going Goodfellas. The movie that best represents Miami to you.
So I actually went with a similar thought process to the U as you did at Florida State. So I picked, where do I have it here? Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
A good movie, right? Really good movie.
Yes, it is.
Great first half of the movie. Second half, I don't really need it. Similar to the movie The Deer Hunter. Great movie. Fantastic first half. Then they go to Vietnam and it's take it or leave it, right? Miami, I'm going only in the last 40 years of this because they sucked in football before that. Great 20-year run. Pretty mid at best since then. Mid to bad since then. Okay, so still, when you think of Miami, you think that's a brand. That's football school, right? Full Metal Jacket. That's a really great war movie. Oh, yeah, well, what about Saving Private Ryan and Apocalypse Now? And it's like, okay, yeah, those ones are better. Yeah, of course. Great first half. Not necessarily the great second half. And maybe they get a swan song like the Mickey Mouse Club song at the end of Full Metal Jacket. We'll see. And it's kind of unhinged too, right? I mean, obviously, I don't want to give too much away if you haven't seen that movie by now. But there's some really unhinged moments, especially in the first half of Full Metal Jacket. That's what Miami was, man. They were out there. It was crazy. It was like, come live the life, right? Disillusionment of what this lifestyle is. And then it's still crazy throughout the back half, like Miami's been the last 20 years. It just hasn't been good, like Full Metal Jacket.
Miami to me, see, I went a little deeper. I went way back in history to Miami to when they sucked terrible.
Okay.
You know what was surprisingly a box office flop because it came out at the same time as Forrest Gump?
There's a couple great movies from that year that you can go with. Yeah.
Yes. It's The Shawshank Redemption, otherwise known as Miami Hurricanes. It is kind of cliche to like it. Like of course, it's your favorite movie of all time. Everybody's parents grew up with it. So obviously it's the popular pick.
There. Yeah.
So I'm going to go Shawshank Redemption. Box office flop. Miami. Very early on.
And it's like what your parents who haven't seen a big movie in 20 years would say.
Right.
They'd be 100%. Like, Shawshank, that's the greatest movie of all time. It's a really great movie, to be fair. I don't want to poop on Shawshank.
It is a great
movie. I see what you're doing.
And again, Miami's great program. It's a great program. It is one of the greatest of all time now because of what the house that Schnellenberger built.
It's got the recruiting base, right? One of the great recruiting bases ever. I mean,
originally
Shawshank has one of the greatest authors ever behind it.
Because Florida State, Stephen King, because Florida State was also in state. Florida is there overshadowing Miami, which is Forrest Gump. And the other one that's another huge one that I'm missing from that year.
Yeah, kind of a quirky one. Maybe they would have claimed a national championship. Pulp Fiction.
Pulp Fiction. There you go. Yeah. So that is, to me,
Pulp Fiction
Miami,
claim a national championship.
The Shawshank Redemption. They
third
would claim
brand, an Academy Award.
What I consider to be the third brand in this, Clemson. Who's Clemson to you?
I'm throwing a pick that not a lot of people, a lot of people might not know about, and that is The Conversation starring Gene Hackman. You ever seen that movie, Drake?
No.
Really good movie, but here's the problem with it. After you watch it the first time, you don't want to watch about the first hour of it, okay? It's good buildup, and it builds a lot of tension, and really what's great about the movie is the last 10 or 15 minutes of it are fantastic, right? Clemson, always good.
Mm-hmm.
Won a national championship in the 80s. But clearly, this last decade has been their most fruitful time ever. And to be honest, their other two major sports leave a lot to be desired. So, and most of the cast of the conversation outside Gene Hackman leave a lot to be desired. So that's why I'm going with that. Because if you went through the history of Clemson football, you really just need the last like 10 years. It's a good academic institution. It's not great, depending on the program. It's okay. And so that's not Gene Hackman's most well-known movie. He's a great actor. The last 15 minutes are fantastic, much like the last decade of Clemson football.
Clemson to me is Star Wars. They won a national championship with Ken Hatfield. People forget.
They did.
So Clemson, good early on. Solid start here. We've got a good basis we can build. And then unheard of for 20 years. Just drops off the face of the earth for a while. But wait, it's back. And it's good again.
But it was way better than ever, unlike Star Wars.
True.
Wow, you went down easy on that one.
I do agree. I mean, the following 3 Star Wars that came out.
I'm thinking too far into this.
The sequels, the prequel was much worse than the sequel, but at the same time, big gap in between. Reminded me a lot of Star Wars. Good again.
A lot of money.
Now we're kind of all over it. Now we're all okay. This is a lot of Star Wars. You're mediocre at best. You're still here, but you're not. What have you done for me lately? Nothing but just year in and year out. Tell me you're going to be good, and then just kind of flop. Star Wars, Clemson. The next brand that we'll go with, NC State. Not NC State. Let's go UNC next. Mine, I'm going to get mine first.
Go ahead. Yeah.
The Fast and Furious franchise. Always been here. UNC has always been here. Pretty strong start, too. Every now and then they throw in something solid. You know, he's like, oh, well, it's another Fast and Furious movie. That's UNC in basketball again. Here they are. Sometimes it's great. Most of the time, it's pretty overhyped. It's like, oh, here it comes. And then it just doesn't really live up to your expectation. Every now and then it's good. Doesn't live up to your expectation. But again, it's always been there, so it's got the history. It's still well-known and a classic. Also, Paul Walker, who helped build the franchise, is dead. Dean Smith, also dead.
Correct.
UNC, Fast and Furious.
My North Carolina one, this was tough, Drake, because anyone who knows me and knows how I got my first name knows I hate Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Really don't like them at all. That said, taking all these things into account, I had to be an objective journalist like I so often am. I am comparing them to The Godfather Part 1.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. It's a great brand. They've got an awesome history in athletics, and it's a really good school. There's a lot that goes well for it, okay? Now, as we talked about a little bit earlier, the highs in football are not the highest you can get.
Right.
Okay? There are some lulls in The Godfather, the first Godfather. There certainly are. It's still a great movie. And then you see, the sequel in Godfather 2, and you're like, wow, that might be the perfect movie, right? So it's pretty darn good, but it's not quite there. I don't know that they've won a national championship in baseball, but always have good baseball teams, good lacrosse program, great women's soccer program, in case you were wondering. And Godfather is one of the great casts of all time, right? Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, to name a few. Those are the two best ones. Obviously, Robert Duvall in there too. Then you think of North Carolina's famous sports alums, people like Michael Jordan, Lawrence Taylor, Mia Hamm. Ever heard of them? Yeah. Putting some of the greatest actors of all time in an ensemble cast in a movie, putting some of the greatest team sport athletes of all time on the same campus. North Carolina, play the music.
Our fifth
You
school.
didn't play it. Thank you.
Virginia. I did. I think this works. Virginia. Can you hear that?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I meant the Godfather music, but you're good.
Virginia.
We'll probably get copyrighted for that.
I'm going with, what is this? For Virginia. Give me Rain Man.
Someone please clip that. Someone please clip that.
Smart school.
Yeah.
Really good at one thing. Basketball. And if you remember, Rain Man, really good at counting.
Yeah.
Bad at most everything else.
Yeah.
Virginia.
That one hits
Man.
home for us. Yeah. Virginia, which is the most recent school on this list I have visited. I was just there over the weekend, Drake. I don't know if you know this. I was there for what I would call a graduation. But at the University of Virginia, they are far too pretentious for that. They call it final exercises.
Oh.
And where would you normally have a graduation?
An arena, football field, maybe?
Yeah, but more specifically on a campus, right?
Yeah.
Not at Virginia, because they don't have a campus. It's the grounds. And those people graduating, Drake, what year in school are they?
23.
Yeah, but
Seniors?
like what if you say what year, freshman, sophomore, what would you say?
Seniors.
You would think. No, they don't go by that. They call them fourth years. All this is building up to my pick. So when I think about the school in toto, it's the movie Citizen Kane.
Oh.
Which everybody who thinks they're good at watching movies and just read the AFI Top 100 is like, Citizen Kane is the best movie of all time. And it's a bit too pretentious for its own good. It's a great, great movie. I'm sick of people saying that it's the greatest movie of all time because I don't think it is, but it is a great, great movie. Virginia, great school. Great school. And I heard these commencement speakers talking about how it's just been getting better in my lifetime. I'm like, no, it hasn't. And that's not a knock. Virginia's been a great school for 300 years since it opened. Okay. It's one of the best public schools in the whole country. All right. So Citizen Kane. But then I did an audible here, Drake. Okay.
No. Hurry, I'm
because
hungry.
I thought about the athletics program in general, and I said the movie Parasite, which won the Academy Award, but still, I think most people in this country have not seen that movie. You know why? Because it's a foreign film.
It's not in English.
People don't want to deal with that. It's one of the greatest foreign films ever. What is Virginia great at in sports? Basketball, for sure.
Recruiting foreigners.
But also, one of the great men's lacrosse programs of all time. 7 national championships. But who watches lacrosse? Who watches foreign films? I watch a lot of lacrosse. And Virginia had a big win over the weekend over the Texas Longhorns in the national semifinal. You know what sport that was?
Lacrosse.
Men's tennis. Great at that too. But who watches it?
Foreigners.
There you go. So I think Parasite's a little more apt.
If it was a
It's
song.
great. It's pretentious. But it's something that not a lot of people see. We see Virginia football, and it's not very good.
If it was a song, it would be Jukebox Hero.
Sure. Yeah. No, I get you. I see what you did there.
Yeah.
I'm more of a hot-blooded guy.
This says rock. The next school. We got to hurry because I've got
We
to
got to
take
do this quick. Yeah.
I've got to
We're
take
getting too
kids
good in our explanation.
to a restaurant. Virginia Tech, to me, is
That's so loud, bro. Turn that.
It is.
They like rock, man. There's not a lot going on out there in Blacksburg.
It's the movie Ants. Which is much worse than its brother movie, A Bug's Life, released at the exact same time. Virginia Tech, much worse than Virginia. Ants for the Hokies.
I'll push back on this because there is something they're much better at over their
Okay,
history.
well,
And
hurry.
that's the sport of football. So what I said is I took a little cop out here. Colin Farrell movies, okay? You know Colin Farrell? He's a pretty good actor. And some of his movies are really darn good, okay? So when you look at his whole discography or his filmography, it's pretty darn good. Just like Virginia Tech's football, right? But, you know, the bad is bad, and that is every other sport, and plus a little bit of their academic standards, engineering aside. And there's some bad Colin Farrell movies out there, okay? So like the 2001 football season with Mike Vick, okay? That's Banshees of Inisherin. The rest of it is cellular. So there you go. Colin Farrell movies for Virginia Tech.
Last but not least, the movie that encapsulates NC State. This is because I think they're going to the Big 12 and I really want them. Paddington 2. You might not know it, but it's a 99% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow.
It gets crapped on. You wouldn't think about it. It's kind of just sitting there for everybody to overlook. But the critics love it. And it could be a difference maker on the big screen and in our conference.
We thought about this one pretty similarly. This was, I think, the toughest one to pick for me. I'm going with Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins.
All right.
Okay?
Why?
Because you think of the Nolan trilogy and you think of the other two movies, Dark Knight Rises. That would be North Carolina and Duke. But Batman Begins is a pretty solid movie, especially compared to the comic book movies of today, at least in my opinion. And so when you look back at NC State, you're like, oh, you know what? They're never dreadful at football. At worst, they're just okay, kind of like Virginia Tech. But it's got good upside, never going to be as good, never going to win the ACC, really. Basketball's the same way. Baseball's the same way. They went to Omaha a couple years ago. And it's become a much better school over the last couple of decades because of a lot of really good in-state students going there. And so NC State, when you look back on it, you're like, that's a pretty good school. When my dad went to Duke, they used to chant, if you can't go to college, go to state. If you can't go to state, go to jail. I don't think they'll say that now, which, Batman Begins got a lot of crap at first, especially after The Dark Knight was so good. But you look back on it, you're like, yeah, it's not as good as the other two, but it's a pretty good movie. We'll take you Batman Begins. I'll watch that. We'll take you state. But if you can't get in, maybe figure out 3 Hots and a Cop.
Drake Toll. Cameron Stewart.
This was good.
Locked on Baylor. Oh, dude, the bumper music's just banger. Hardly know her. Drake Toll from Sports Illustrated's Inside the Bears. That's Cameron Stewart. Thank you for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day. If you didn't like today's show, well, we did. For our everyday listeners, please come back tomorrow. This has been and always will be Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Baylor.